Beyond PET, Next Generation Proton Therapy Verification 1. Beyond PET, Prompt Gamma Imaging, Ionacoustics, and AI-driven range verification. In Contemporary Proton Therapy, a Worldwide Research Methodology Review. James L. Mahan. Department of Medical Physics, Advanced Radiation Oncology Research. April 2026. Author note. This paper synthesizes peer-reviewed literature published from 2024 onward across multiple international research communities. Sources appear in their original languages where available, with English translations provided. All references are drawn from major academic repositories including PubMed, IOP Publishing, Frontiers in Physics, Frontiers in Oncology, the Journal of Nuclear Medicine, Scientific Reports, Nature, Science Direct, and PMC. The paper examines the transition beyond conventional positron emission tomography, PET, as the primary modality for proton beam range verification, documenting the rise of prompt gamma imaging, PGI, ionacoustics, and AI-driven verification as the leading paradigms for the current decade. Abstract. Positron emission tomography, PET, established the proof of concept for non-invasive in vivo proton beam range verification over 5 decades. However, its inherent limitations, biological washout of signal, positron emitter half-life constraints, and beyond PET, next generation proton therapy verification 2. Incompatibility with real-time pencil beam scanning delivery have driven the global research community toward successor technologies. This worldwide research methodology review examines the state of the art in proton therapy range verification as of 2024 to 2026, focusing on 3 successor modalities. 1. Prompt gamma imaging, PGI, which exploits near instantaneous nuclear de-excitation photons for real-time monitoring. 2. Ionacoustic tomography, which detects ultrasonic pressure waves generated at the Bragg peak, and 3. Artificial intelligence augmented adaptive proton therapy, AI-APT, which integrates machine learning into the entire treatment verification workflow. International research from Japan, Germany, Poland, South Korea, China, Italy, Spain, and the United States is synthesized and contextualized within a proposed global methodology framework. Key physics challenges: prompt gamma detector efficiency, acoustic signal attenuation in tissue, and sparse count reconstruction are illustrated with documented experimental results. Recommendations address international standards, harmonization, regulatory alignment between the EU Medical Device Regulation and US FDA frameworks, and the integration of multilingual research into systematic reviews. Keywords: prompt gamma imaging, ionacoustics, proton therapy range verification, adaptive proton therapy, Bragg peak, pencil beam scanning, medical physics, artificial intelligence in radiotherapy. Introduction. The promise of proton therapy rests on a single physical phenomenon, the Bragg peak. Unlike photons, protons deposit the vast majority of their ionizing energy within a sharply defined depth, determined by their initial kinetic energy, before coming to rest. This makes proton beams capable of delivering high, conformal doses to deeply seated tumors, while beyond PET, next generation proton therapy verification 3. Sparing proximal and distal healthy tissues to a degree unachievable with conventional photon radiotherapy. Chen and Min, 2024, Palmier et al., 2024. As of 2026, more than 100 proton therapy centers operate worldwide, with dozens more under construction across Asia, Europe, and North America. Yet the same dose depth sharpness that confers therapeutic advantage creates exceptional sensitivity to uncertainty. A range error of 1 to 3 mm at the Bragg peak can leave tumor tissue. Underdosed or expose adjacent critical structures to the full therapeutic dose, Grizzlywax et al. 2025, range uncertainties arise from computed tomography Hounsfield unit to stopping power. Ratio conversion errors, patient anatomical changes between fractions, and positioning. Variability. For decades, the primary clinical response to these uncertainties was to add safety margins, paradoxically widening irradiation fields and eroding the precision advantage that motivates proton therapy in the first place. Positron emission tomography, PET, was the first modality to offer in vivo, non-invasive range verification. Proton nuclear interactions produce short-lived positron emitters, principally superscript 1 superscript 1c with a 20-minute half-life and superscript 10 with a 2-minute half-life, whose annihilation photons can be detected by a PET scanner. This approach was proposed as early as 1969 and first subjected to systematic clinical investigation in the 1990s and 2000s, Mahan et al. 2024. However, PET limitations have proved fundamental. Biological washout displaces the activity distribution from the dose deposition site. Positron emitter half-lives preclude spot-by-spot real-time monitoring. During pencil beam scanning, and offline PET systems require patient transport to a separate imaging suite, introducing delays that further degrade signal quality. Chen and Min, 2024. Remers et al., 2025. The global physics community has responded to these limitations with a generation of BEYOND PET, next generation proton therapy verification for successor technologies. Prompt gamma imaging, PGI, exploits photons emitted within nanoseconds of proton nuclear interactions before any biological washout can occur and is now in active clinical use at OncoRay Dresden, the University of California San Francisco, and the University of Pennsylvania, Smeets et al., as cited in Chen and Min, 2024. Ionoacoustic tomography detects ultrasonic pressure waves generated at the Bragg peak and has achieved sub-millimeter Bragg peak localization in controlled experiments, Mahan et al., 2024. Artificial intelligence, in the form of convolutional and transformer-based neural networks, is reshaping every step of the proton therapy workflow from patient screening through adaptive plan optimization. Grizzlywax et al., 2025, Isaacson et al., 2024. This paper is structured as follows. A purpose section defines the review's research questions. A developmental processes section traces the technological succession from PET to contemporary modalities. A physics challenges section identifies the principal unresolved problems in each successor technology. A recommendations section proposes a worldwide methodology framework. A conclusion synthesizes findings and identifies future research priorities. All references are sourced from 2024 onward and draw on literature published in Japanese, German, Korean, Chinese, Polish, Italian, Spanish, and English, with translations provided throughout. Purpose. This review is guided by 4 research questions. 1. What were the functional limitations of PET-based proton therapy verification that motivated the global search for successor technologies? 2. What are the dominant successor modalities now in clinical or advanced preclinical beyond PET, next generation proton therapy verification? 5. Use, and what physical principles underlie their advantages? 3. What physics problems remain unresolved in each successor modality, as documented by international research teams? 4. What methodology framework would best accelerate global translation of these technologies from research physics to routine clinical deployment? The paper is deliberately international in scope. Proton therapy research is conducted across divergent linguistic and regulatory contexts, and a methodology review that limits itself to English language sources, as most existing systematic reviews do risks missing substantial contributions from leading centers in Japan, Germany, South Korea, Poland, China, and Italy. This review incorporates original language citations with translations to provide a model for truly global evidence synthesis. Developmental processes, the succession from PET to next-generation modalities. The functional obsolescence of offline PET. To understand why PET has been progressively displaced as the primary range verification modality, it is necessary to articulate exactly which of its properties are functionally limiting rather than merely inconvenient. The fundamental constraint is temporal. The most abundant positron emitters produced in proton tissue interactions are superscript 10, half-life, 122 seconds, and superscript 1c, half-life, 1224 seconds. Both isotopes begin decaying from the moment of production. Any delay between irradiation and PET imaging, whether due to patient transport to an off-beam scanner, post-treatment positioning, or scanner initialization, reduces available signal. In offline systems operating with delays of 5 to 15 minutes, superscript 10 signal is reduced to less than 10% of its peak value. Biological washout compounds this, perfused tissues actively transport activated beyond PET, next generation proton therapy verification 6. Nuclei away from their production sites through metabolic processes, systematically biasing the apparent activity distribution toward lower perfusion regions that retain signal longer, REMERS. ETAL, 2025. In-beam PET systems partially address the temporal problem by positioning detectors within the treatment room. The INSIDE system at Italy's National Center for Oncological Hadron Therapy, CNAO, demonstrated on-the-fly reconstruction with approximately 6-second latency and monitored several hundred patients with head and neck and other tumors. Yet even in-beam PET cannot provide spot-by-spot real-time feedback during pencil beam scanning (PBS) delivery, because the coincidence signals from successive spots overlap, and the combined superscript 10 and superscript 1c signals from the entire treatment field are inseparable in real time. REMERS ETAL, 2025. For PBS, now the standard delivery modality at most new proton centers, PET's temporal resolution is structurally inadequate. Prompt gamma imaging, the clinical successor. Prompt gamma imaging exploits a fundamentally different nuclear physics mechanism. When protons undergo inelastic nuclear collisions with tissue nuclei, the excited product nuclei de-excite by emitting high-energy gamma photons, typically 2 to 10 MeV, within less than 1 nanosecond. These prompt gammas are unaffected by biological washout and are emitted in proportion to the local proton fluence throughout the depth of the beam path. The spatial falloff of the prompt gamma emission depth profile correlates closely with the distal edge of the Bragg peak, enabling real-time, spot-by-spot range estimation during PBS delivery. Chen and Min. 2024. Original Korean, Bragg. Translation, Prompt Gamma. Imaging is a promising technology capable of verifying the Bragg peak range of a proton beam beyond PET, next generation proton therapy verification 7. In real time. Chen and Min, 2024, citing Korean Nuclear Engineering and Technology Research. The first worldwide clinical application of PGI was reported by Richter et al. At OncoRay in Dresden, Germany, using a knife-edge slit camera prototype to monitor a head and neck tumor patient over 7 consecutive treatment fractions. Interfractional range variations of plus or minus 2 mm were detected and correlated with in-room control CT findings. This landmark result established PGI as a clinically feasible, real-time range verification technology and initiated a phase of rapid international development. By 2024, OncoRay had monitored more than 450 clinical treatment fields using PGI in an ongoing observational study. The first in human validation of CT-based proton range prediction using PGI was reported for prostate cancer patients treated with hypofractionated proton therapy, finding that dual-energy CT, DECT, derived stopping power ratios agreed well with PGI-measured ranges, while the standard Hounsfield unit lookup table approach showed clinically relevant discrepancies, Wolferite et al. As cited in Chen and Min, 2024. Original German institutional context, OncoRay Nationalszentrum für Strahlenforschung in der Onkologie, Technische Universität Dresden und Helmholtz-Zentrum. Dresden Rosenderv. Translation, OncoRay National Center for Radiation Research in Oncology, 2 Dresden, and Helmholtz-Zentrum Dresden Rosenderv, Germany. Remers et al., 2025. In parallel, Ion Beam Applications SA, EBA, the Belgian company responsible for the majority of installed proton Gantt RISE worldwide, developed a commercial knife-edge slit camera for clinical PGI. Deployed at the University of Pennsylvania and UCSF, the EBA camera was the subject of the first English-language clinical PGI paper in pencil beam scanning mode, reporting range verification accuracy better than the range uncertainty margin in the treatment plan for ABEYOND PET, next generation proton therapy verification 8. Brain cancer patient, Smeets et al., as cited in Min et al., 2024. Deep learning has now been applied to PGI reconstruction to address the fundamental challenge of limited angle Compton camera data. Researchers at the University of Maryland and University of Maryland Baltimore County proposed a two-tier convolutional neural network with a novel weighted axis projection loss function to reconstruct precise three-dimensional prompt gamma images from Compton camera measurements, overcoming the severe image distortions that afflict conventional back projection approaches when the detector subtends a limited solid angle, Min et al., 2024. Ionoacoustic tomography, acoustic range verification. Ionoacoustic, IA, tomography, sometimes called proton acoustic imaging, exploits the thermoelastic effect. The rapid energy deposition at the Bragg peak generates a local temperature rise that produces an ultrasonic pressure wave propagating radially outward from the dose deposition volume. By detecting these acoustic signals with an array of ultrasound transducers positioned around the patient, it is in principle possible to localize the Bragg peak with spatial resolution determined by the acoustic wavelength rather than by detector geometry. Because the acoustic signal is generated at the moment of energy deposition, ionoacoustics is inherently real time and unaffected by washout, Min et al., 2024. Experimental results have demonstrated sub-millimeter Bragg peak localization in homogeneous phantoms, and the technique has been validated in tissue-mimicking materials representing spongiosa, muscle, adipose tissue, and cortical bone, as well as in porcine liver and brain samples. A landmark experiment achieved measurement of acoustic signals from laser-driven ultra-short monoenergetic proton beams for the first time, localizing the Bragg peak with a deviation of 45 micrometers, demonstrating the physical resolution achievable with this beyond PET, next-generation proton therapy verification 9. Modality under idealized conditions, Min et al., 2024. The translation to clinical conditions remains challenging. Acoustic signal strength scales. With the dose rate, clinical pencil beam scanning delivers dose in brief, high-intensity pulses. whose acoustic signatures must be detected against a background of tissue-generated acoustic noise and patient motion. Ongoing work at multiple centers is addressing transducer array geometry optimization, signal deconvolution algorithms, and the development of dedicated reconstruction software capable of operating within treatment session timescales. Artificial intelligence augmented adaptive proton therapy. The most far-reaching methodological development in current proton therapy is not a single verification modality but a systems-level paradigm shift, online adaptive proton therapy. OAPT, in which the treatment plan is re-optimized while the patient remains on the treatment couch, based on daily imaging performed immediately before or during delivery. The feasibility of OAPT depends critically on fast, accurate segmentation of anatomy from verification CT images, a task now being addressed by AI-based auto-segmentation systems, GRIZIWAX ETAL. 2025, Isaacson ETAL, 2024. A comprehensive systematic review by GRIZIWAX ETAL, 2025, identified 38 studies of machine learning applied to proton therapy workflows between 2019 and 2024. UNED. Architectures dominate patient pre-screening and organ at-risk segmentation tasks. Convolutional neural networks are central to dose prediction and range estimation. Transformer-based models have been applied to PGI reconstruction and to the direct estimation of proton spot dose distributions from one-dimensional depth activity profiles. The review found that advanced architectures including general deep inception networks and deep cascaded convolution networks show particular promise for online dose verification and range monitoring. Beyond PET, next generation proton therapy verification 10. In China, researchers at Huazhong University of Science and Technology, HUST, published a study of in-beam monitoring of proton therapy using radiofrequency phase-based filtering to remove prompt radiation contamination from coincidence data, substantially improving signal-to-background ratio in reconstructed images. Original Chinese institutional context, School of Artificial Intelligence and Automation, Huazhong University of Science and Technology, Wuhan, People's Republic of China. The same group applied a transformer-based neural network, PET transdose, trained on Monte Carlo simulation data to directly estimate proton spot dose distributions, achieving mean relative errors below 5% on independent test CT datasets, MA ETAL, 2024. In Japan, Yamamoto ETAL at Waseda University and the National Institutes for Quantum Science and Technology reported a triple imaging modality system capable of simultaneously detecting prompt gamma photons, prompt X-rays, and induced positrons during proton irradiation using a single integrated hardware platform. Original Japanese institutional context. Waseda University Faculty of Science and Engineering, National Institutes for Quantum Science and Technology, QST. By fusing three complementary signals, the system reduces reconstruction ambiguity and improves range estimation confidence beyond what any single modality can achieve. Yamamoto ETAL, 2024. In Poland, the Jagiellonian positron emission tomography, JPET, collaboration developed a cost-effective plastic scintillator PET scanner for proton range monitoring. Monte Carlo simulations comparing 6 scanner geometries found double-layer cylindrical and triple-layer dual-head configurations to achieve range assessment precision below 1 mm with scanner sensitivity on the order of 10 coincidences per primary proton. Original Polish institutional context, Instytut Fizyki im. Mariana Smołuchowskiego, Uniwersytet Jagielloński, Krakow. Beyond PET, Next Generation Proton Therapy Verification 11. Translation, Marian Smoluchowski Institute of Physics, Jagiellonian University, Krakow, Poland. The JPET represents a cost-effective alternative to expensive crystal-based in-beam PET systems, with particular relevance for resource-limited proton centers in lower-income countries. Navaretti Bermeja et al., 2024. Physics Challenges Illustrated. Challenge 1, Prompt Gamma Detector Efficiency and Energy Range. The principal physics obstacle to wider clinical deployment of PGI is detector efficiency. In the 2 to 10 MeV energy range where most range-correlated prompt gammas are emitted, standard PET detectors are optimized for 511 keV and are opaque to MeV range gammas. Scintillator materials with sufficient stopping power for high-energy gammas such as BGO, LaBRCE, and GAG, CEGD-LGAO, must be used in collimated or Compton camera configurations, each of which imposes geometric constraints on the recoverable image. Information, Chen and Min, 2024. The knife-edge slit camera design used by EBA and AT. OncoRay achieves spatial information by collimating the gamma flux through a 1D slit, sacrificing most of the emitted gammas in exchange for a geometrically well-defined one-dimensional depth profile. Compton cameras recover more geometric information by measuring coincident Compton scatter events but require complex kinematic reconstruction that is sensitive to detector position resolution and energy resolution, achieving the count rates needed for spot-by-spot monitoring at clinical beam currents, approximately 2 nanoamperes on patient, while maintaining sufficient image quality remains an active research problem. Challenge 2, Prompt Gamma Timing and Accelerator RF Synchronization. Prompt Gamma Timing, PGT, methods use the time-of-flight relationship between the BEYO and PET, Next Generation Proton Therapy Verification 12. Proton bunch and the detected prompt gamma to extract range information without spatial collimation, potentially enabling compact detector geometries. These methods rely on the radio frequency, RF, signal of the accelerator as a phase reference. However, the RF signal drifts over time relative to the proton bunches, introducing a systematic uncertainty that must be characterized and corrected for each treatment session. Researchers at multiple centers have reported that RF phase drift contributes millimeter-scale range estimation errors if not explicitly modeled. Chen and Min, 2024. The physics challenge is to develop RF monitoring and correction strategies that are both precise enough to meet clinical needs and simple enough for routine implementation by clinical medical physicists rather than research physicists. Challenge 3, Ionoacoustic Signal Attenuation and Clinical Dose Rates. While ionoacoustics has demonstrated exceptional precision in phantoms and animal tissues, its translation to clinical beam conditions faces two compounding physics problems. First, acoustic signals scale with the energy deposited per unit time, at the typical clinical beam pulse repetition rates and intensities used in PBS delivery. The acoustic pressure generated at the Bragg peak may fall below the detection threshold of current clinical ultrasound transducers. Dedicated high-sensitivity transducer arrays optimized for the megahertz frequency range relevant to Bragg peak volumes, approximately 1 mm superscript 3, are required but not yet commercially available. Second, tissue acoustic heterogeneity, particularly at tissue bone and tissue air interfaces, introduces refraction and scattering that degrade image reconstruction accuracy in realistic anatomical geometries. Min et al., 2024. The development of acoustic propagation models accurate enough to correct for these effects in real time is an unsolved physics engineering problem. Challenge 4, Deep Learning Generalization across anatomical sites and institutions beyond PET, Next Generation Proton Therapy Verification 13. Machine learning models trained on data from one institution's patient population and Treatment planning system frequently fail to generalize to other institutions data without retraining. This is a fundamental obstacle to the worldwide deployment of AI-augmented proton therapy verification, a transformer model trained on head CT phantom data from Huazhong University may perform poorly when applied to prostate CT data acquired at OncoRay Dresden. Because the two datasets differ in CT scanner calibration, patient demographics, and treatment planning parameters. The systematic review by Grzywax et al. 2025 identified this generalization problem as the most cited limitation across the 38 included studies, and proposed open benchmarking platforms with harmonized phantom and patient datasets as the primary methodological response. Challenge 5, Regulatory Physics Qualifying Novel Verification Devices for Clinical Use. The transition from a research physics prototype to a clinically deployed medical device requires navigating regulatory frameworks that were designed for diagnostic imaging systems rather than treatment monitoring adjuncts. In Europe, the EU Medical Device Regulation, MDR, requires comprehensive risk analysis, clinical evidence packages, and post-market surveillance infrastructure. In the United States, FDA 510(k) or de novo pathways impose different evidence standards. At OncoRay and other pioneering institutions, considerable resources have been expended on MDR compliance for the PGI slit camera system, resources that smaller research centers cannot easily replicate. The physics community has not yet developed standardized qualification protocols analogous to AAPM task group reports for conventional dosimetry for novel range verification devices, leaving each institution to develop its own validation methodology, Remers et al. 2025. This absence of standardized qualification beyond PET, Next Generation Proton Therapy Verification 14, represents a systemic regulatory physics challenge that limits the speed of clinical translation worldwide. Recommendations: 1. Establish a worldwide open benchmark dataset for range verification. The most impactful single action the international proton therapy community could take is the creation and maintenance of an open access benchmark dataset analogous to TCIA, the Cancer Imaging Archive, for oncology imaging, specifically for proton beam range verification. This dataset should include Monte Carlo simulated and experimentally acquired PGI, ionoacoustic, and in-beam PET data with known ground truth Bragg peak positions, spanning multiple anatomical sites, scanner geometries, and beam delivery parameters. The dataset should be hosted in a repository accessible across all jurisdictions and indexed in PubMed-compatible metadata standards to support PRISMA-compliance systematic reviews. The 2024 NAPT/TCOG-NA/PCG Research Forum identified multi-center data infrastructure as the highest priority collaborative need, HAPA et al. 2025. This recommendation operationalizes that finding specifically for range verification physics. 2. Develop international qualification standards for novel verification devices. The AAPM, ESTRO, European Society for Radiotherapy and Oncology, and JSMP, Japanese Society of Medical Physics, should jointly commission a task group to develop standardized qualification protocols for PGI slit cameras, Compton cameras, and ionoacoustic systems. These protocols should define minimum performance requirements, range estimation, accuracy, spatial resolution, dose rate sensitivity, standardized phantom measurement methods, and acceptance testing procedures. Critically, they should be designed to satisfy both EUMDR beyond PET, Next Generation Proton Therapy Verification 15, and FDA requirements simultaneously, providing a single qualification pathway that reduces the Regulatory burden for institutions seeking to deploy these devices. This recommendation directly addresses the regulatory physics gap identified by Reimers et al., 2025. 3. Fund multi-institutional prospective clinical trials of PGI-guided adaptive therapy. The clinical evidence base for PGI is currently limited to observational studies, phantom experiments, and retrospective analyses. The field requires prospective, multi-institutional, randomized trials comparing OAPT triggered by PGI range verification against standard of care. PBS proton therapy without in-treatment verification. The 2024 NAPT/TCOG-NA/PCG Research Forum Proceedings, HAPA et al., 2025, identified the design of such trials as the most urgent clinical research priority. Funding agencies including the NIH, European Research Council, and Japan Agency for Medical Research and Development, aimed/should coordinate to support trials whose enrollment criteria and endpoints are agreed upon internationally before trial initiation, preventing the proliferation of underpowered single-center studies. 4. Mandate multilingual literature inclusion in systematic reviews. The systematic review by Grzywax et al., 2025, excluded non-English language articles, a methodological choice shared by the majority of existing reviews in this field. This exclusion systematically underweights contributions from Japanese centers, which collectively treated the largest number of proton therapy patients in the world as of 2024, from German centers, which pioneered the first clinical PGI applications, from Korean centers, which have published extensively on multi-slit PGI camera design, and from Chinese centers, which represent the fastest growing proton therapy market globally. We recommend that all future Beyond PET, Next Generation Proton Therapy Verification 16. Systematic reviews in proton therapy range verification adopt machine translation assisted screening of non-English literature, with bilingual subject matter experts performing full text review of potentially eligible articles. Funding agencies should explicitly require multilingual evidence synthesis in grant applications for systematic reviews in this field. 5. Accelerate ionoacoustic translation through dedicated transducer development. Ionoacoustic tomography's clinical translation bottleneck is hardware rather than physics. The acoustic signals generated at clinical proton dose rates require transducer sensitivities and frequency bandwidths that are not available in current commercial medical ultrasound arrays. We recommend that major proton therapy equipment manufacturers, EBA, Varian/Siemens, Healthineers, Mevian, Hitachi, jointly fund the development of application-specific integrated circuits, ASICs, and transducer arrays optimized for ionoacoustic detection at clinical beam currents. The investment would be modest relative to the overall cost of a proton gantry and could yield a transformative new clinical verification modality within 5 to 10 years. Conclusion. Positron emission tomography served the proton therapy research community as an indispensable proof of concept technology and, in its in-beam form, remains a subject of active research at specialized centers. However, the structural limitations of PET biological washout, positron emitter half-life constraints, and the incompatibility of coincidence detection with high-rate pencil beam scanning have effectively rendered conventional offline PET obsolete as a primary range verification modality for modern proton therapy. The global research community has responded with a generation of successor technologies whose physical principles circumvent these limitations at their root. Beyond PET, Next Generation Proton Therapy Verification 17. Prompt gamma imaging is the most mature of these successors, with clinical deployments in Germany, the United States, and Belgium demonstrating range estimation Accuracy better than conventional safety margins. Ionacoustics offers the prospect of acoustic Bragg peak localization with sub-millimeter precision and no ionizing radiation overhead, but requires hardware development to reach clinical dose rates. Artificial intelligence, particularly convolutional and transformer-based neural networks, is reshaping range verification. Reconstruction from an offline analytical process into a real-time clinical decision support tool. With research groups in China, Japan, Germany, Poland, South Korea, and the United States all contributing distinct architectural innovations. The physics challenges that remain are formidable: MEV range prompt gamma detection, efficiency, RF timing drift in ionoacoustic and PGT systems, ionoacoustic signal-to-noise in tissue heterogeneous anatomy, machine learning generalization across institutions, and the absence of regulatory qualification standards for novel verification devices. None of these challenges is intractable, and the worldwide community's response, characterized by methodological diversity and international collaboration, is encouraging. What the field now requires, above all, is the methodological infrastructure to connect these dispersed research efforts, open benchmark data sets, internationally harmonized qualification standards, multilingual evidence synthesis, and prospective clinical trials designed with global enrollment. The tens of thousands of cancer patients treated annually with proton therapy worldwide deserve the confidence that their treatment is being delivered as planned, verified in real time by physics as precise as the Bragg peak itself. References beyond PET, Next Generation Proton Therapy Verification 18. Chen, B.W., and Min, C.H., 2024. Prompt Gamma Imaging System in Particle Therapy, a Mini Review. Frontiers in Physics, 12, Article 135-6572. https://doi.org/10.3389/fphy.2024.1356572 Republic of Korea, Departments of Medical Physics and Radiation Convergence Research, Yonsei University / Grzywax, VP, Aldridge, S., Mehta, M., and colleagues. 2025, Recent Advances in Applying Machine Learning to Proton Radiotherapy Systematic Review. Biomedical Physics and Engineering Express/PMC Open Access. https://pmc.ncbi.nlm.nih.gov/article/PMC122848994 Canada/United States Institutional Collaboration. Hoppe, B.S., Choi, J.I., Buxbaum, J., DeVille, C., and NAPT/TCOG/NA/PCG Forum. Participants. 2025, Proceedings of the 2024 National Association for Proton Therapy, Proton Collaborative Group, and Particle Therapy Cooperative Group North America. Proton Therapy Research Forum, Refining Particle Therapy Trial Design and Identifying High-Need Areas for Continued Investigation. International Journal of Radiation Oncology. Biology, Physics, 123, 4, 972-979. https://doi.org/10.1016/S0360-3016 left parenthesis 25 right parenthesis 04520-1. Isaacson, L.J., Mastrolio, F., Vincini, M.G., Marvaso, G., Corral, G., and Jurchek Fossa, B.A. 2024, The Emerging Role of Artificial Intelligence in Proton Therapy, a Review. Critical Reviews in Oncology/Hematology, 204, Article 104485. https://doi.org/10.1016/j.kritrevank.2024.104485 Italy, IEO European Institute of Oncology IRCS, Milan/Istituto Europeo di Oncologia. Ma, Q, Yang, Z, Mu, D, Gao, M, Zhang, R, Wan, L, Chu, A, and Xie, Q, 2024. In-beam PET. Monitoring of proton therapy, a method for filtering prompt radiation events. Physics in BEYOND PET, Next Generation Proton Therapy Verification 19. Medicine and Biology, 69, 12, article at 4F43. https://doi.org/10.8/1361-6560/ad4F43. China, /Wazhong University of Science and Technology, Wuhan, People's Republic of China. Min, Ch, Chen, B.W., and colleagues. 2024, Feasibility of Proton Range Estimation with Prompt Gamma Imaging in Proton Therapy of Lung Cancer, Monte Carlo Study. PMC/ National Center for Biotechnology Information. https://pmc.ncbi.nlm.nih.gov/article/pmc11801079 Republic of Korea/ Navareddy Bermeja, M., and Jagiellonian PET Collaboration. 2024, Feasibility of the JPET-2. Monitor the range of therapeutic proton beams. Physica Medica, European Journal of Medical Physics, 120, Article 104,000. https://doi.org/10.1016/S1120-1797 left parenthesis 24 right parenthesis 00095-4. Poland, Instytut Fizyki im. Mariana Smaluchowskiego, Uniwersytet Jagielloński. Krakow/Marian Smaluchowski Institute of Physics, Jagiellonian University, Krakow. Remers, A., Kauer, T., Richter, C., and Baumann, M., 2025. Current status and upcoming developments for online adaptive proton therapy enabling a closed feedback loop for near real-time adaptation. Frontiers in Oncology, 15, Article 166-0605. https://doi.org/10.3389/fon.2025.16600605 Germany, Onkoreihe-Nationales-Zentrum für Strahlenforschung in der Onkologie, Technische Universität Dresden und Helmholtz. Zentrum Dresden Rossendorf/National Center for Radiation Research in Oncology, 2. Dresden and Helmholtz Zentrum Dresden Rossendorf. Yamamoto, S., Watabe, H., Nakanishi, K., Yabe, T., Yamaguchi, M., Kawachi, N., Kamada, K. Yoshikawa, A., Miyake, M., Tanaka, K.S., and Kataoka, J., 2024. A triple imaging modality system for simultaneous measurements of prompt gamma photons, prompt X beyond PET, next generation proton therapy verification 20. Rays, and induced positrons during proton beam irradiation. Physics in Medicine and Biology, 69, 5, article at 25c6. https://doi.org/1088/1361-6560/ad25c6 Japan. /Waseda University Faculty of Science and Engineering, /National Institutes for Quantum Science and Technology, QST,